Applying for the role.
So shalom everybody. Thank you for joining our APA briefing about the way Israel is handling the COVID-19 and the Omicron variant these days. We'll wait just a few more minutes to everybody have the chance to log in, and we'll start right away because our experts are the experts in Israel, very, very busy guys. And unfortunately, I know Professor Zalka, who is the Israel COVID czar these days, must run away after limited time back to a governmental meeting. So we'll go through that. Few things of managing this briefing. If you be kind enough to make sure that your name appears on your Zoom, so we'll know how to address you. And if it is not possible, please do write down your name and media outlet when you are reaching out to us to ask questions in the chat application in the Zoom. My name is Tal Albina. I'm the Strategic Director of APA, and with me, as you can see, some of the familiar faces of our great team. We have Shirley, who is running the operation from Brussels. We have Katya from Paris, Tovi from London, Shaked from Israel, and some other guys who are trying to help them. Our senior advisor, Yossi Lemkovich from Brussels, Oliver Bradley from Berlin, David Kalfa from Paris, Eitan Bergman, and Shlomi Dahan, and we are all here for you, and we hope it will going to be a fruitful and interesting question. With me is our senior media advisor, Nir Natan, who will collect all your questions. So please do not be afraid that we'll neglect anyone. Just send us a message in the chat, and we'll go and let you have the opportunity to ask the question. Without any further ado, I would like to present our experts. We have Professor Salman Zalka, as I said before, the Israel Chief COVID-19 Officer. Professor Zalka was the General Manager of Ziv Hospital, and some of you who joined us in one of our press trips to Israel before, if you remember when people were flying from place to place, remember this era? So in that times, Professor Zalka hosted us, at least some of the new faces I see here, in Ziv Hospital in Tzfat, where he was not only handling this hospital, but also all the activity with the Syrian civil war wounded that he initiated in the Israeli-Syrian border. And Professor Zalka is a graduate of the Medical School of the Technion in Haifa, a clinical associate professor in Bar Ilan University, and a senior lecturer in faculties of social science and health science in the Department of Military Medicines in the Hebrew University. Professor Zalka is a member of the Druze community, and he was chosen to light a beacon on the Israel's 71st Independence Day. Professor Zalka previously served as commander of the IDF Medical Service Centers, and upon this role of him, he initiated the hospital and the medical care of the Syrian war wounded. Professor Zalka, I know you are in a very hurry to go to back to a government meeting. If you can just please brief us before everything else, what is the current situation in Israel right now? Because, you know, to me, it seems like maybe even in the corona, we are kind of a startup nation, a very binary situation. The civilians are in zero panic. The government seems to be in one panic. How would you reflect to that?
Good afternoon. Thank you very much. Thank you for the staff and for good afternoon for my colleagues from the Israeli system. I'm really very happy to meet and to share with you our COVID-19 status. I hope someday we would meet again physically and not by Zoom. I'm sorry for really my little time that I have for this meeting. We are in a new situation all over the world, and also at Israel, like many countries. During our fourth wave, the Delta wave, we started facing an increase in cases associated with the new variant, the Omicron variant. Currently, well over 100 cases have been confirmed at Israel, and additional suspected cases, about 600, are being investigated during these hours. The majority of our cases, of our Omicron cases,
Please, everybody, please mute yourself. Thank you.
Our majority cases of Omicron are imported cases. Other is close contacts with people that came from abroad. We are seeing really a notable increase in daily confirmed cases, and we have an R ratio more than 1. That means we are increasing the number of cases day by day. And it is important to say that the number of hospitalized and severe cases still remains low, and most of them are regarded to the Delta and not to the Omicron. It seems somehow like other places at Europe, at South Africa, but we still need more time in order to understand what is the severity of the disease with the Omicron. The Israeli response this day to the new emergency, to the Omicron, involves several modalities. The first one is we are trying our best in order to slow the rate of the importation of new cases from abroad, and to have more time in order to improve our preparedness to the Omicron wave. This modality involves restriction of the international travel based on what we call the traffic light. Today there are about 50 countries that are signed as red, and according to this sign, Israeli citizens are not allowed to travel to them, and Israeli citizens that are coming from these countries have to undergo 2 PCR tests and to stay home for about 7 days. In some cases, unvaccinated people cannot stay home. They have to stay at some hotels in order to be sure that their tests are negative, and then they can go home after the first test that is done at our airport. Travelers from red countries are really, we are worried about that, because, as I said, most of our cases these days is an imported cases, and we want to be sure that this number of cases can be less in order to have more time to arrange hospitals, to arrange vaccination, and so on. We are trying with really a very restricted epidemiological investigation with our staff to investigate every case and to have all the contacts in order to trying to stop the spreading of the virus to other contacts. And in this way, with the PCR test, we are really doing our best to contain the new cases without spreading it into the community.
Professor Zaka,
we
Professor Zaka, they were talking about vaccinating in a fourth booster. Are we in front of such a situation?
Yeah, first of all, we have, I would say, enough people that have to be vaccinated with the third one. We have about 1 million people that got the 2 shots, but they did not get the third one, the booster. So we're trying our best. What I am saying of buying time is to have this time in order to push, to convince our people to take the booster, the third dose. Besides, we have started with our children 5 to 11 in order to help their parents to have a good decision of oncolate their children. So this is the main issue that we want to do in the next 2 weeks, 3 weeks, till we have the Omicron with a higher wave. We're really doing it at the schools, at the various community setting, in collaboration with the municipalities, with the Ministry of Education, with the HMOs, in order to help people again making a good decision. We will not enforce any child or any adult of having vaccinated, but we really believe that to have the vaccination more close at the schools, at the periphery of Israel, would help others to get inoculated.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for now. I would like to present, with your permission, our other expert, Professor Ran Balitzer, who serves as Chief Innovation Officer of Clalit, the Israel's largest healthcare organization. He also serves as founding director of the Clalit Research Institute. And since 2020, Professor Balitzer is appointed as the chair of the Israel's National Expert Panel on the COVID-19. And I would like to ask you, Professor Balitzer, beforehand, Israel was kind of a lab for the world. And in these days, when these variants are just traveling in our little global village, is there any meaningful for the borders? Can we teach someone else something? Can we learn from some experience out of the Israel?
Thank you, and it's a pleasure to meet you all. I think that we are now in a slightly different position than we were in previous waves and in the last year in general. We were generally the first, among the first countries to implement the interventions, especially vaccine-derived interventions, and we were first to really conclude a rapid, large-scale vaccination campaign back in December, January 2021, and again, the first country in the world to approve the use of booster third dose vaccination and to implement it in a wide scale. And indeed, 80% of the population in Israel that could have received their booster dose did indeed receive it, especially mainly in the months of August and September of this year. And so we are also probably the first to be learning we were first to experience waning immunity following the first 2 doses, to experience a Delta wave driven by this waning immunity, and to counter it through the booster vaccination campaign that we have done in August and September. Nowadays, we are first to be monitoring the impact of these booster doses and to try to find early signals for any waning immunity for this intervention as well. When it comes to Omicron, Israel has responded fairly quickly and fairly decisively in terms of closing its borders very, very early on when the first note of the new variant has kicked in. And I think that one could attribute to that the fact that today in Israel, we only have a small number, a 3-digit number of overall Omicron cases. And we have achieved this low number and the fairly contained local transmission thanks to three different types of policies that we've enacted. The first was indeed the early closure of borders selectively for Israelis to countries where there were known massive cases, and non-selectively for tourists from the entire world in order to reduce to the minimum the importation of the new strain. The second policy that helped us achieve this was the early use of PCR testing capable of identifying S gene target dropouts, which means for 3 weeks now, every single PCR that is positive in Israel goes through a second PCR through a machine that's able to identify these S gene dropouts, which means they are finding very early on any suspected Omicron case, or most suspected Omicron cases, then sending them on for further genetic sequencing. So this is the second tier of our response policy. And the third tier is the performance of meticulous epidemiological investigation and contact tracing in order to cut the transmission chain of each and every Omicron case, thus reducing the chances of rapid local transmission to the bare minimum. Now, this combination is only feasible when you have a small number of overall cases. This explains why Israel continues to harden its line in terms of incoming tourism, as well as in travel of Israelis to specific countries, because for at least 1 or 2 more weeks, we want to be able to reduce to a bare minimum the number of Omicron cases we import. So our epidemiological teams will be able to be effectively conducting a transmission chain stopping in each one of these cases, and we can hopefully delay local transmission in 1 or 2 more weeks. Now, I want to make it clear, we do not expect to be able to prevent Omicron from vastly disseminating in this country as it had in many other countries until now. Our sole aim is to delay this massive local transmission in the few weeks that would allow us first to increase the vaccination uptake of booster doses of people who had not received their primary doses, and of children that are now in an ongoing effort to vaccinate the kids. And right in these weeks are supposed to get their second dose that will protect them also, I believe, from Omicron as well as from Delta. The second thing is to have more time to get closer to the point in which effective drugs will become available. And finally, in order for us to, how shall I say, to select judiciously the types of restrictions that we impose within Israel on the economy, to titrate it to the right level according to the level of severity of Omicron, that is still a big question mark. Since right now it is still a high level of uncertainty regarding the potential of Omicron to cause severe illness, and as long as we don't know these answers for sure, and I think that within a week, top 2 weeks, we will have very substantiated information from other countries on this question, and then we will be able to titrate our internal restriction policy according to actual evidence, rather than to do it right now, which is you have to be sometimes more severe because of this level of uncertainty that is still very high. So this is the rationale behind our policy, and I will stop here to entertain any more questions.
Thank you so much, Professor Balitzer. Professor Zarka, may I ask, Professor Balitzer was talking about all kinds of restrictions. Are you considering a closure in Israel?
You know, we are still in small numbers, and it seems that this is the time in order to react and to try our best in order not to have a higher wave of Omicron. So the first weapon is vaccination, and as I said, we are trying to push the vaccines to every place at our country. The second issue this is really why I have a little time, because during the next minutes, we will have a meeting with the Prime Minister in order to consider some restrictions about different places, crowding and so on, in order to help our people to take guard and to be more protected. As we know, just vaccination is not enough. Mask and other restriction is needed in order to help people, especially elderly people and high-risk population, to take care and to avoid the new wave, the new variant.
And what would you say, just before we are losing you for the Prime Minister, what is the most important challenge you would define that Israel is facing right now?
I think the main issue is what our people think about the new situation. It seems that we were at a situation of getting out of the Delta wave, of the fourth wave, and having our routine life again. But now it seems that we are in different direction. We are not getting out of the Delta. We will stay with the Delta. And additional to the Delta, we will have a new variant, the Omicron. So to explain this new situation to our people and to let them realize that we are in a new emergency situation, they need to be inoculated and they be to adapt their daily life for the new situation. I think this is the biggest challenge that we have during the next 2 weeks.
And how many verified Omicron cases are we talking about?
I think it's about 175 cases, and we have about 600 suspected or highly suspected. Highly suspected is due to the test, the PCR test, and some of them will be reassured later by the genetic test. So because also learning from what happened at Europe, and because we have already cases that are not related, that are not connected to abroad, it seems that we started our fifth wave, and it's just having or trying to have more time to be more ready for what will happen at Israel in the 3 weeks.
Thank you so much. Ladies and gentlemen, we have more than 60 participants in this brief from all over Europe, very important media outlets, and we want to make the utmost opportunity for you all to ask questions. So I guess we'll just go to questions right away. And if we will try to go by the order of asking the questions, Leonard from the Netherlands, if you can please unmute yourself. Leonard, can you please ask your question?
My audio. Yes, I have a question. Here in the Netherlands, you can see that we have a complete lockdown since Sunday, because the government says the situation is extremely dangerous. They didn't see the results until now of the Omicron, and as a kind of preemptive strike, they, let's put it in Israeli ways, they decided to do this complete lockdown. What is your opinion of this complete lockdown, and is this a good example for the rest of Europe?
Professor Zalka?
I am sorry, I'm not sure I heard all the question, but it seems that all of us have to understand, to realize that we are in a new game. We have with the new variant, it's really the ability of transmission from one to other is very high. And we need to do, as I said, our best. First of all, is the vaccination, and the other issue is to think about restriction. I'm not familiar with the situation at Netherlands about how many people are vaccinated, about what is the situation, what is the public doing with the new variants. But I really believe that in some cases, restriction or lockdown could be something that we need to consider in different countries according to the situation of the different countries. This is why we are trying our best. This is why we closed our airport, or we have closed it against tourism, because we're trying to have more time. We believe that we will be at the same as like Britain, as like Netherlands, as I said, during the next 3 weeks. But again, I'm not familiar with the situation at Netherlands and which it is necessary, the lockdown. I really believe that is one of the tools that you have against this pandemic.
Thank you very much. There are some journalists asking Professor Balitzer, how important have been the booster to the vaccinating of the Israeli population, and does it really help?
If I may, before my friend
thank you
Ran,
for this question. I think.
Go ahead, Professor Zalka.
Sorry,
please.
Zalka.
yeah, if I may, before my friend Ran, I have to continue to other meetings, so I'm really sorry. And I want to wish you good health and a happy new year. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you very much. We know how busy you are, and we really appreciate your effort. Thank you so much, Professor Zalka. Thank you very much. Professor Balitzer, please.
Sure. So I think Israel has been the model country to understand the importance of booster vaccination. The reason for that is that Israel was the first country to massively vaccinate its population with the first 2 doses. And therefore, waning immunity has manifested in Israel months before it has manifested in other countries. We have studied this phenomena and we have published it, and we have demonstrated again and again how critical the waning immunity is in protecting the population. And it is the case that people who have received their 2 doses and 6 months have elapsed from their second dose, they are much less protected against both infection and severe illness. This is why when we had our Delta wave starting in mid-June and going into August, we saw a continuous increase in the proportion of the severe cases from those who were fully double vaccinated over 6 months before. They have become the majority of severe cases, and this led us to the understanding that a booster dose at that point with the ensuing wave of Delta was a necessity. Studies that we have conducted during this time and after our booster dose, you can find our publications in the Lancet and in the New England and in other publications, have been continuously demonstrating the great effectiveness of the booster dose in protecting against Delta. And indeed, the protection of severe illness by receiving the 3rd booster dose is 92%, 92% in reducing the severe illness as compared to getting 2 doses more than 6 months have elapsed in the second dose. So I think today any country in which the mainstay of the vaccination campaign took place 4, 5, 6 months ago must consider seriously a very decisive vaccination campaign with a booster dose, because the population may think they are protected, but they are not. They are not even mildly as protected as they might think they are, and this could be an opportunity or risk for ensuing waves. That is true for Delta. And the data that comes out of the United Kingdom suggests that has all received their third booster dose may be susceptible to infection in Omicron, even more than they are susceptible to infection from Delta. I hope I've answered the question.
Thank you very much. And if you were talking about Great Britain, so we have BBC Rochelle Sharer, please. Rochelle, can you please unmute yourself and ask your question?
Hi, thank you for this. You've been speaking about what we can learn from Israel's data about vaccine effectiveness against Delta. I wondered if there was anything that we can say from Israel yet about effectiveness against Omicron. I understand cases are low in the country, but I was wondering whether even there were any lab-based studies or anything that we could learn given the earlier booster program than much of the world.
I'm afraid that maybe I should say that fortunately, the number of cases that we have experienced verified against Omicron until now have been too small in order to say anything with great confidence. One needs to do these studies in a very meticulous way because, as we know, the population that has been exposed to Omicron has not been just people who tend to be very specific, and more of them are fully vaccinated. So this skews kind of the proportions that we see in terms of people who are vaccinated and who are being infected with Omicron at this point in our where we are. Let's reiterate something. Vast majority of the cases we have in Israel until now are imported cases, are cases of people who catch the illness during their travel abroad, and a small minority of them, basically, of those who are verified, have been local transmission. And just to tell the exact numbers, out of the 175 fully verified individuals with genetically sequenced and verified Omicron, 113 are people who have returned from a trip abroad. 31 are contacts, direct contacts of people who have returned from abroad from different countries, and 17 are local transmission in 3 different main infectious events. There are 14 under testing.
We are losing your audio, Professor Balitzer. We are losing your audio.
One of these groups they belong to. So you hear me now? Do you hear me well?
Now it's okay.
Okay, so as I said, from 175, 113 returned from abroad and catch the Omicron there. 31 were direct contacts of these people, and 17 are local transmission unrelated to travel in 3 different infectious events, and 14 others are still under assessment. So as you can see, at least for these first fully verified sequenced 175 Omicron cases, most of them are travelers, and therefore it's a little more difficult for us to ascertain the questions that you've asked.
Thank you very much. And from Great Britain, we'll cross the canal to France. Paulina, please unmute yourself and please ask your question.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, we hear you very good.
Wonderful. Actually, I was wondering, since a lot of Israeli people have been vaccinated with their boosters since already for almost 5 months, do we already know something about how long is the booster efficient?
So these, again, since the booster doses have been given in beginning in August, and so it has only been basically 3 to 4 months since the receipt of the booster dose. It is still difficult for us to ascertain, I think, in the coming weeks and months, but it is a little bit early for us to say something in certainty. We are beginning to look at the first signals coming out of the data, but these are still early times to say something in confidence. We can assume that there will be some level, there could be expected some level of waning immunity for the third booster dose as well. This is what we would generally expect, but we need to note and to quantify the level of waning immunity that takes place in the clinical terms 3, 4, and 5 and 6 months after the booster dose, both for infection and for severe illness, and these data are not yet fully analyzed in a way that we are certain about.
Thank you for that. And from France, we're going to Germany. Danielle Keeley, please ask a question. Danielle, please unmute yourself.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, very good, please.
Perfect. Good morning, Professor Balitza. My question is concerning the fact that Israel has been a role model when it comes to vaccination efficiency. However, you have a very easy task to close down your country with only one airport existing, or with the new Eilat, it's 2. However, you still have, like other countries, for example, in Europe, a pretty consistent number of people who are resisting to get vaccinated. They have some Haredim, some people of the Arab population. So you wouldn't possibly be able to get everyone vaccinated. That means, is locking down the country for foreigners the only option? Because if it was, and if that worked out for Israel, it wouldn't work out for transit countries in Europe, Asia, and so forth.
So can you reiterate the question? What are you actually asking?
If locking down a country that can be locked down very easily because it has pretty few ports of entry, is the only really accountable solution of fighting the virus trafficking, this wouldn't go for many, many countries in Europe, Asia, and around the world, because they are transit countries.
I can only agree. I think that it will, one cannot provide sensible advice to other countries which work in a completely different setting. Every country must devise its own response based on the limitations and setting that it has, the amount of infection already existent in the country, and gauge their responses accordingly in a setting of pure uncertainty. This is a very tough time for decision makers globally, I think, and in every country, different decisions are being made based on the different setting in every country. It is difficult at this point, it's of course impossible to take from the Israeli case to other countries, because even for us, even with all of the precautions we have taken, we knew and we know that Omicron is entering and that Omicron will eventually become the dominant strain and that there will be local transmission, but we managed to delay it enough to buy critical time. And I'm very happy about those decisions that were made, because they did allow us to buy critical time and to be in a position now when we have fewer than 1,000 cases, in a stark contrast with other countries. So many of the most difficult decisions to take can be delayed. And are being delayed. And so the economy within Israel is quite open at this point. And we could afford that because we delayed local transmission through the individual efforts in cutting transmission chain. This is, of course, not relevant in other countries at this point.
Professor Balitza, Daniel was talking also about the people who opponent the vaccinations. You mentioned, Daniel, the Haredic, the ultra-Orthodox, and some Arab population. How is it in a matter of challenge to the system in Israel?
So I think that every country meets the same challenge in this setting. People who oppose or hesitant, I would say. There's a small population that strongly oppose vaccination, and there's a larger number of cases that are hesitant about taking the vaccines. it's an obvious phenomena, you know, and we tackle it. The way we try to tackle this issue, both in the general population as well as in specific sectors, is through very transparent sharing of the data, the local statistics, the facts, the scientific facts. People, in many cases, when shown the actual facts and the actual numbers and the logic behind a specific policy, would choose to adopt it eventually if portrayed in an open and transparent manner enough. And we totally acknowledge our uncertainties. We acknowledge the things we do not know, and there are many things we do not know at this point in time. But while this is a challenge, I think that many are responded favorably. That is also true for the ultra-Orthodox and Arab communities as well. And I think with efforts we've done with community leaders recently, especially I can give a few examples from the ultra-Orthodox community, where we have spent time deliberating with the local leaders, the religious authorities in these communities. We spent time explaining the data, explaining the logic, and allowing them as decision makers for their communities to be able to take part in making informed decisions. And it was the case that in many cases they have concluded and offered advice to their respective communities to indeed be indeed take the vaccine and not take the risks associated with not getting vaccinated.
Thank you very much. And we'll go to Yossi Lemkovich, our senior advisor from Brussels. I understand you have Professor Klumek with you, a European expert for COVID-19.
Yes, hello. Yes, we have with us the pleasure to have Professor Nathan Klumek, who is a prominent specialist of in infectious diseases. He is emeritus professor of medicine and infectious diseases at the Université Libre de Brussels University. He is also honorary head of the infectious diseases department at the Saint-Pierre Hospital in Brussels. And since 1983, he has been involved in clinical research for infectious diseases and HIV AIDS. He is also a COVID advisor to the city of Brussels. What is also interesting is he just published a book titled The Viral Threat, and with under title Vaccination. You see the cover of his book. And in this book, he answers a question about COVID in a language that everyone can understand. The question are, where does this virus come from? Why do some people die from it and others do not? My question, thank you, Professor Klumek, to be with us. My question, I know that you want to discuss also the question of the vaccination of children and the protection of older people, but I want to ask you one question. How can we eradicate this virus?
First of all, thank you for this very nice and long introduction. About eradication, I think it's the goal that everyone wants to achieve, but unfortunately, I think that for the moment, this goal is not possible to reach, because we succeed in eradication of viral disease in two cases in history. It was with the smallpox and with poliomyelitis. And to eradicate a virus, you need to have some condition. One of the conditions is you don't have to have an animal reservoir, which is not the case for SARS-CoV-2. You also need to have a virus who doesn't mute, and a virus who is still sensitive to the vaccine. And you still need, the most important condition is to have consensus at the international level as far as vaccination is concerned, and as far as the finance of every vaccinating in each country. And we are far, far, far from that. So for the moment, I think that eradication is not in the agenda, but things could change. If I refer to HIV, without vaccination, we are able to control the epidemic by efficient treatment. And so HIV, for the moment, is an endemic disease. And maybe that's the next step with COVID-19 to go out of the pandemic and the epidemic with exponential cases like we will have with Omicron, and to go to, I would say, an endemicity with control the multiplication of the virus. So I think that's the next for the future, the treatment.
Yossi, please unmute yourself.
Yeah, Professor Klumek, in your book, you noted that vaccination will maybe not be enough. Could you elaborate on this?
But it's obvious that vaccination is not enough because, first of all, the virus has mutation. So what we see with the Delta is probably worse, but we need more data on that, but will probably worse with Omicron. And we don't know for the virus that will come after Omicron. That's one point. The second point that we have pocket of resistance to vaccination. In Belgium, we have different regions. In Brussels, we have only 60% of the people who are vaccinated. So we could try everything we want. We have still these people who are refusing the vaccination. So we need additional measure. And one of these measures, as I said, is the treatment and also the restriction. But as far as restriction is concerned, there is a big problem, is the acceptance for the population. I see that in Netherlands now, they took the decision of lockdown. Yesterday, we had in Brussels a manifestation of people who are against any restrictions, and there was violence. So I can't imagine that tomorrow the government would say we go to lockdown in order to protect from Omicron. That will be a revolution.
Thank you, Professor Klumek.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Yossi. Professor Balitzer, we have a question for you from Inga Rog. Please unmute yourself.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for doing this. I'm Inga Rog, correspondent for the Swiss newspaper Neue Zürcher Zeitung. Apologies, my camera is not working. Professor Balitzer, I would love to ask you on the boosters. That, as you said, there are 1 million Israelis who haven't got the booster, and the numbers are particularly high as younger the people get. The younger generation is just not taking the booster. Does that mean, do you observe a kind of vaccination fatigue in Israel? And how are you going to address this? Thank you.
Thank you for this question. Yes, I think that in many other places, there's a general sense of fatigue from the need to continuously change our daily behavior and take upon ourselves additional restrictions and vaccination as part of us confronting this illness. So this fatigue is something that I think is very generalized. I think it also is impacting the fact that only 80% of our booster eligible population, 4 out of 5 million, have chosen to do so already. I suspect that as the disease in the next wave becomes more imminent here in Israel, a larger proportion of those 20% that are still lacking will choose to receive their booster doses. And I do hope they will do so in time for them to be protected when the Omicron wave will hit here. There's not much time left. I think we're in a matter of weeks at the best. And so it is now high time for those people to go ahead, and we continuously daily urge everyone who has not completed their 3-dose regimen to do so. This is basically a vaccine that requires the 3 doses to get its full effectiveness. We know that by now, especially when time has elapsed. So we constantly try to educate the public on this point and to make sure that the last people do. I must say that when we talk about, for instance, the older population above the age of 60, we're well over 90% that have received a full 3-dose regimen and are therefore considered as protected as can be at this point in time. So while we are continuously trying to improve, we overall, I think, have done a decent job until now in getting our population vaccinated with the booster dose.
Thank you very much. And we are going to Yikinki from the West Quest from France, please.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, please.
I want to know, do we have the new data for the efficacy of the vaccine against the Omicron in Israel? Thank you.
Do we have the...
We didn't get the questions. I'm sorry.
Sorry, I would like to know, does Israel has the new data of the efficacy of the vaccine against the Omicron?
No, so the answer is it is too early for us. We only had 175 verified cases, and the vast majority of them took place really in the recent
Professor Balitza, we lost your audio again. If you can repeat, please.
So I'm afraid that since we only have 175 cases of verified Omicron until now, and because vast majority of these cases is in the last few days, it is too early for us to provide evidence-based high quality data as we did before on the vaccine effectiveness. At this point, we are continuously collecting and analyzing the data.
Thank you. And there is a question, I understand, from Brussels, from Joanna. Yossi, would you like to read this question we have? Until you do find
yes.
this. Okay, go ahead. Hello. Go ahead, please.
Okay. The question from Joan Monte from RTBF is the following. Belgium has just decided to allow the vaccination of children aged 5 to 11. In Israel, have you already been able to measure the impact of this vaccination on the infection in this population?
In which population?
On
5 to 11.
Yeah, 5 to 11. On clusters in schools, this is the question.
So our vaccination campaign for children has started a month ago, and so it is too early for us. Most of the children have not even yet completed the full 2-dose sequence, and so it is very early for us to be drawing conclusions on the effectiveness of this vaccination campaign as of yet.
Thank you. Tal?
Can you hear me now? Thank you. Professor Balitzer, I was asking on behalf of a few journalists that are sending questions about vaccinating in the Palestinian territories. What could you elaborate on that subject that is kind of not only a medical question, but also a geopolitical one?
Sure. So I will be able to provide.
We cannot hear you properly.
So here's to what I know. First of all, can you hear me now?
Yeah, now we can hear you fair.
Okay, good. So yes, so again, I am not personally involved in these efforts as an advisor, a professional advisor to the government. I am not fully aware of all of the efforts being done, but I am aware of the fact that there has been efforts to vaccinate the population working in Israel and additional populations from the Palestinian Authority with over 250,000 doses provided, and as well as tens of thousands of vaccinations provided in hospitals in East Jerusalem, I am also aware of the fact that there was efforts in assisting the attainment of over 4 million vaccine doses to the Palestinian Authority in recent months. And I hope, and the basic notion that I think that is true both for the Israel, the Palestinian Authority, and as well as many other countries, is that obviously this disease knows no border. And basically, we are not safe until everyone is. And it is within our immediate, I think, epidemiological and professional interest above and beyond the other levels of basic approaches to try and drive a highest uptake of vaccines as possible in the Palestinian Authority as well. But I'm sorry that I do not have any practical daily information on this, because I not deal with this on a daily basis.
But as you said, it is a challenge, and if we're talking about challenges, let's go to challenges. Sabine, please, your question.
Aha, funny. Good morning. Thank you for the Zoom, which is very interesting. You basically answered a lot of questions I had. Maybe if you had a percentage of the children 5 to 11 being vaccinated once or twice, sorry. And I have another general question. You mentioned a lot of studies that you've done. I wanted to know if you had elaborated on the question of people who have had COVID already. Are they more protected against the second COVID disease afterwards, after having COVID and being vaccinated and boosted? Thank you.
You're welcome. So the question was about how many 5 to 11 have been vaccinated. The data, to my best knowledge, is that we have vaccinated
Ran, we seems to have a problem hearing you again. So we'll just use the time to tell you guys that in a few minutes we'll go to Hungary and Romania, so please be prepared. Professor Balitzer, can you improve anything with the audio? Sorry for those technical problems. Professor Balitzer, well, we are facing a little bit of a winter storm in Israel. You guys in Europe are used to. We are kind of shaking. So maybe it influenced also our internet connections. We hope to reduce the connection with Professor Balitzer in a minute. And maybe in the meantime, we'll go to Hungary to collect the questions. Iles, are you with us?
Yes, I'm here. Thank you very much. I wanted to ask you about that. You mentioned earlier how important the transparency of data in convincing hesitant people or who tend to refuse vaccination. And I wanted to ask you if you have any other special measures to convince them. This question may have already been also answered partly, but I wanted to know if you have some specific advices to other countries who are dealing with this problem as well.
I'm back. Yes, I've lost you for a second. I hope you heard my previous response.
Unfortunately, we didn't. So if you could complete this answer and then refer to Ilis' questions about any other restrictions and way to kind of force, if I understand correctly, the measures.
I will get to that in a second. Just completing the first one, we have vaccinated until now about 145,000 children between the ages of 5 and 11. This comprises about 12% of this relevant population here in Israel to date. So this is the answer about that. Now, the second question was about enforcing what? Again, can you say?
The second question I asked?
Yes, please.
It was about the people who have had COVID before the vaccination and who had a complete vaccination, completed their vaccination and had the booster. Did you make some studies about these people? Are they best covered because it was supposed to be having had the COVID before the boostering and the vaccination? Or was it just a myth?
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you. Can you repeat the question?
Sorry, I try again, otherwise we stop. I said there was a kind of myth at a certain time, maybe it's a reality, that the people who had contracted COVID before being vaccinated and who had terminated their vaccination cycle, that they would be best protected than the other ones.
So if I understand correctly, the question is, are the people who have been covered from COVID-19 and then received at least one dose of the vaccine, are they well protected? Our data does suggest that this subgroup that has recovered and then received the vaccine, you can think about that vaccination dose as a booster of its own to the protection that was conferred by their previous illness. And our answer, yes, our data suggests that they are very well protected. Very similarly to those who have received the full 3 vaccine regimen. I hope this helps to answer. And I think we are getting to the end of our time limit, if I'm not mistaken, Tal.
Yeah, so just if you can please answer the question of Iles about restrictions and the way you see we can force restrictions on people who are not cooperating. I hope I heard the question right, Iles. I apologize if not.
Yeah, just one word, not necessarily restrictions. I just wanted to ask if you have any special measures or advices how to reach those social groups who are hesitant to get the vaccine.
Again, I think that there are 2 things that would make the difference. One is especially local data-driven information provided to these people in a language, in a culturally competent way that they can fully grasp and then act upon, working with local and community leaders in a respectful way that allows them to go ahead and further disseminate the knowledge to their populations, making these measures, the vaccine, for instance, or the tests readily available and easy to attain. The more challenging the effort required to get vaccinated or to get tested is, the lower the uptake will be in any population, and especially in a population with more challenging daily conditions. So these are just a few thoughts about things that we have shown here to be exceedingly effective in increasing acceptance and uptake of the recommendations, and I think they are relevant for perhaps for other countries.
Thank you so much, Professor Balitzer. Maybe just one question, if you will, that comes on and on. How many people are hospitalized because of Omicron, and are there any who needs help in inspiration?
So I don't have the data on admissions within this within these cases. There might be a few that there are, but again, this is very early at this point. These people have most of them have just got infected in the last few days. Not enough time has elapsed for them to develop severe symptoms in the cases that these are relevant. And it is impossible to make any inferences from the small number of very selected cases in terms of age and previous vaccination distribution at this point.
Thank you so much. We appreciate so much your time and, of course, your knowledge. It was very, very interesting. We are aware of how busy you are, so we'll conclude this Corona COVID-19 briefing right now. And thank you again to Professor Zalka. Thank you, Professor Balitzer. Thank you, Professor Klumak. Our media advisor all over Europe are at your disposal if you have any other specific questions. Of course, our media advisors will be very pleased to get your questions, and we'll do our best to ask the questions to the relevant experts and get back to you as soon as we can. So this concludes this APA briefing on COVID-19. Thank you so much for being with us, and I hope to see you again in one of our next briefings. Thank you, and shalom from Tel Aviv.
Thank you.
And apologies if not all the questions were answered, but I reiterate what Tal just said. If your question was not answered and you really feel that it could be answered, please send us the question and we'll pass it on.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye.